Took a while to sort of pick my voice up. All right, well, we're beginning our next session, and Diane Hodiak is here with 350 Deschutes, so she's the motivating force behind this conference. And give her a round of applause. But she's also going to have a presentation, so I hope you guys will enjoy that. And again, I want to thank everybody for coming. And so here we go with round whatever we're at, 4 or 5.
Thank you, Tom. You're just too kind. So we already know after listening to our climate, I have to get used to Robert doing, he's the clicker. He's the human clicker. Isn't it good we've actually got a human doing this job rather than, we haven't automated it. So thank you very much, Robert. So what we've learned is that climate change is advancing much quicker than we realized, and really quicker than the scientists have forecasted. So it's time that we're doing something here at our conference. And so we know that climate change, we know that the scientists, here's for example, the scientists have said that how our sea ice is melting much quicker than the scientists have really told us that they would. And so we know that we're going to be moving along to address climate change with our own actions. We know that climate change is progressive, and that's why some people say, well, it's too late, why should we do anything now? And I have to say to those people, the thing we have to realize is that climate change is like a disease, and it's only going to get worse if we don't do anything. And we talked about, Michael Murphy this morning talked about, well, we could get to 6 degrees, we could get to 8 degrees, and if you look at a lot of the things that would happen at that level, it's just, as he said, not pretty. So right now, we know that our future is in our hands. And so when we look at things like that, I want to just do a little exercise with you, just to start thinking about what you could do as an individual. And so I want you to cross your hands. Cross your arms, rather, excuse me. Okay, and I want you to note, how are your arms crossed? Are they, do you have the left arm on top or the right arm? Who has the left arm on top? Oh, quite a few, really. Okay, and who has the right arm on top? Okay, so remember which way you've got them crossed, and I want you to just kind of shake out now. And then I want you to cross your arms again. And so notice now, were your arms crossed the same way they were before?
Yep.
They were. Okay, so for most of you, I'm seeing most of you nod yes, and that's usually how it works, is that most of the people cross their arms the same way they were crossed before. Now, is there anybody in the room? Now try to cross your arms differently than the way you had them crossed before.
Doesn't feel right.
It feels funny, doesn't it? Now, did it hurt you to cross your arms differently? No, well, it was pretty painless. And so what I'd like to suggest is that really our habits are really, most of our habits are personal choices. And those are things that are kind of like crossing our arms. It's things that we're kind of used to. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those are the things we have to keep doing over and over again. And so what I'm going to suggest in this session is that we're going to cut our carbon emissions. And just because I know we have Alan in the audience who's going to be talking about other greenhouse gases, usually I shorten it to say carbon emissions, but that's really short. Really, we need to think about reducing our entire greenhouse gas emissions. So just to talk about where those emissions come from first. Next slide. And this is something that came from the state of Oregon, and all I have to say is that when looking at our emissions, and I think you've seen this chart earlier today, there's a lot of different ways to calculate our emissions, and it can get kind of wonky at times because there are overlaps and depends on what time you do it. And so, you know, there's various methods that can be used. But we're going to go with a method that was put together in 2015 by the Global Warming Commission of Oregon. And as you see on there, you see that buildings, which are both residential and commercial, if you add all of our buildings together, you come up with quite a big footprint. Transportation is a huge area, and agriculture is 9%, but there's other things that we'll talk about related to agriculture. And our natural gas use is about 10%, but I just want to remind everyone that at 350, we don't consider natural gas a clean fuel. I know we've been told that by the fossil fuel industry, by their marketing promotion. It's true that it burns cleaner, but we have to figure what the Clean Fuels Program does is it looks at the entire life cycle of a fuel. And so you look at the fracking, the production of natural gas as it comes out of the ground, and we know that that releases a lot of methane, which is between 34 and 80 times more powerful in terms of global warming potential than just regular carbon dioxide. And so we need to think about the bridge that they're talking about from natural gas. Many scientists have called that a bridge to nowhere. So we need to somehow wean ourselves of natural gas and get to the clean, renewable fuels. Next slide, please. So one of the things I wanted to address with you is that when we look at agriculture, agriculture was listed, as you see, at about 9%. But there's another thing we need to consider with that, because with our agriculture, there are other considerations. We have to consider how is our food from our plants and our meat and our dairy, we need to consider how is that transported to us. And we also need to consider what is important as far as creating that food, the production of that food. So if we look at this chart, you'll see that being a vegan they call it a food print, has a food print of about 1.5, whereas meat has a carbon equivalent of really more than twice that. And so what we know is that agriculture consumes about 80% of our land in order to create, in other words, the cattle, the chickens, the goats, the sheep. That's about 80% of our land. So when we look at this chart, we look at other factors in addition to our carbon emissions or our greenhouse gas emissions. And that is that when we look at the blue on there, you see that beef, which is over in the far right-hand corner, uses almost twice the water of some of our other food choices. And we look at what does it cost us in terms of when we're feeding those animals? And what about our land use? Because one of the things why the United Nations says that eating meat is unsustainable is because what is going to happen is that a lot of our forests are going to have to be taken down in order to support the cattle industry, the beef industry. So when you look at this, you'll see that chicken has the lowest food print of all the meats. And the interesting thing also is that chicken, eggs, and dairy, and I guess eggs is included in dairy perhaps, accounts for about 65% of NOx, which is nitrous oxide, or nitrogen oxide. And we think of that most often in connection with transportation and cars, but we don't often think about the food print of those animals. And that's really significant because nitrogen oxide, is 300 times more powerful even than methane. And so that's something to consider. And not everyone wants to give up meat. But even something that the United Nations is recommending is that a meatless Monday, for example, even if you give it up one day a week, that would happen, that would help, because meat is actually a more expensive way to live. It's actually healthier also to eat a vegetarian meal or a vegan meal. So the other things we need to consider is that small actions add up. And I can only bring up to you, and it's mentioned earlier today that corporations need to talk about what they're doing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But Ford, for example, the people that make our cars, they are saving $1.2 million a year just by shutting their computers off at night. Just because they have a huge company. And so what I recommend to you is that you get a power strip and just shut off your computer at night, plug your cell phone in there, your printer, any other things that don't need to be running all night. And, next slide. And shut those off when you're not using them. It's just really a simple idea. And we also have a lot of vampire gadgets that we have that we can shut off. And I was at a conference earlier, it was last week now, my week's gone by really fast. And they were saying, well, all of these things are gonna cost me money. And I said, well, wait a second, no, because the National Resource Defense Council has already determined, they've done studies, and they say, just by shutting off your TV and your computers and your printers at night, it's gonna save you approximately $165 a year. And of course, you know, that is changeable depending on where you live. But at least we know that there's a certain amount of money that you will save by shutting off those devices at night. The other thing you can do, there's a kilowatt meter. If you want to find out, do you have some energy piggies in your house? You get a kilowatt meter and just plug it in between the outlet and your device, and you can find out, is that a vampire gadget? Is it still running even when it's off? Or how much energy am I using from that? Then your dryer is your least efficient appliance in your house. So I still use my dryer. There's some things you just have to use a dryer for. But I also I have hanging shelves in my laundry room, and I hang up a lot of my clothes too. So even if you like towels and stuff, sometimes you can just hang them up and pop them in the dryer for the last couple minutes, and you can fluff them up. And the other thing, how many in the room actually monitor their heat by turning it down or turning it up? All right, very good. You know, even just doing it 1 degree at a time, a lot of what we experience is just, once again, habit, where we're comfortable. But try either decreasing or increasing your temp, just 1 degree at a time. Because depending on what kind of furnace or heat pump you may have, if you get up to if you do it in 3 degree increments and you bump it up, sometimes that actually creates more energy use than it does by decreasing or increasing 1 degree at a time. Then how many have a fan in their rooms, in their major rooms in the house? That's good. So we've got a lot of people doing that too. Those can work both winter, they work both winter and summer too, don't they? And then the LED light bulbs. Is anybody in here from the Environmental Center? I know that they're still, I believe they are still doing LED light bulbs, but how many have taken advantage of the 16 free LED light bulbs?
Oh man, that was so great.
Yeah, and I understand they had a backlog for a while, but I was told about a month ago that that backlog is no longer in place, so that you should be able to, hopefully, and I think that they are advertising at the nonprofit table out there. So if you want to get some LED light bulbs, I would recommend that. We did that and our bill just went down significantly. So how many here use Drive Less Connect? Well, Drive Less Connect is something that it's an app, and Commute Options has done really an excellent job in getting some of our local businesses to offer prizes. So if you sign up there, it's basically a carpooling program. And we're going to see a lot more of this. I know the transit company in Bend is starting to think about how we can get people together that want to get to a certain place at the same, more or less same time. But those apps, be on the lookout for those apps that are coming out, because what happens, like say if you sign up for Drive Less Connect and you have a certain number of days, I'm sorry, did someone say something? Or? No? Well, if you go for a certain number of days, and I believe it's 45 days as with carpooling rather than as a single occupancy vehicle, then you qualify to be in a drawing for a certain number of prizes. And they've got some great stuff. They've got energy and tax benefits. Transit might have a transit pass in there. Bicycle safety tips. So lots of stuff on there. So that's something worth considering. And you already heard from Zach as to what is available in terms of electric cars. Did he show you this slide from the Union of Concerned Scientists about how much money you can save by driving electric?
Yes.
Okay, let's move on. That's pretty significant, really, when we look at how much. I drive a Prius V, because I need that cargo space in the back. And my husband and I just love it. We mince words sometimes, thinking who's going to take the Prius, you know. But you'd be surprised how much you can fit in the back of a Prius V. Now that's only a hybrid. I'm just hoping that it doesn't. The year that we bought it, it didn't have much of a difference between the Prius V and the C. But how many in the room drive an electric car? All right. What do you notice about it?
It's quiet. I don't understand the question.
It's quiet, okay, so you like that. How about you, Jason? What do you like about it?
The performance of the vehicle is just, it's 100% instant torque, so car just
It's a sports car.
darts. Yeah.
Total
Yeah.
sports car.
55, 60 miles to the gallon. It's we have a plug-in hybrid.
I mean, what's not to like, right?
Right.
Okay, so later on this afternoon, I really encourage you, we've got so many good sessions coming up. We have Alan in policy, but we also have Sherry Harris Dunning, and Denise Rowcroft from the Environmental Center are going to talk about waste. But I'm going to give you just a little bit of an introduction here, and that is that waste does contribute, of course, to greenhouse gas emissions, and primarily through methane. And methane, we mentioned earlier, is more powerful as a greenhouse gas. But one thing I do is I take my takeout containers with me. And it's amazing, but the restaurants thank me for that. And then I see people, you know, I just bring my little glass containers with the tops that I can stick in my dishwasher. And I bring them to the restaurant, and the people walk by and they say, wow, that's really a good idea. And you know, it took me a while to do that with any regularity, and that's the same way with any of these habits that I'm talking about, is that, you know, don't kick yourself if you don't remember every time. But that helps a lot, because takeout is a huge piece of us creating waste that we don't need. And then decup your coffee. So when you go to the coffee store, and I notice that a lot of them really are just going to give you a paper cup unless you ask. But if you have an option, if you're going to sit down and have your coffee, think about asking for, and please give me a ceramic cup, or please give me your glass cup. Just try to do that if you can, and most of them will oblige. And even if you forego that little piece of plastic on the top, even that helps. So the other thing is just avoid excess packaging. If you shop at Costco or the big box stores, that's probably the worst, but things are double and triple wrapped there. So try to always go to the bulk bin. And I actually ended up buying some bulk bags from Whole Foods, and I use those because then I interviewed, you know, I have a radio show, Carbon Free Does Power Up on KPOV 88.9. And I interviewed a woman from Atlanta who actually puts all of her waste into a 32, for 6 months, into a 32-ounce mason jar.
Oh,
Is that amazing or what?
oh my God.
And I think how she does that is by buying in bulk. And she does make a lot of her own foods too. So to the extent that you can do that, think about living in the bulk department, and you'll actually save money by shopping in the bulk department. And Fred Meyer has a bulk department, Locavore does, nearly Whole Foods, nearly all these places, Central Oregon Locavore, all have bulk departments. So the one other really big one is that, don't you hate all that junk mail? How many have gotten off the mail list? Quite a few. Well, if you haven't quite gotten off of there yet, you can go to 41pounds.org, and you'll help avoid that 2.8 million, you'll help contribute towards that 2.8 million cars that we can take off the road if we just avoided junk mail. And they have two options. They have a free option, and they have one that you can pay for. So that's another idea for you too. And then,
I've got to find out, what more do you get?
by the paid version,
Yeah.
you know, I
If
don't
you
know. I think it
get
lasts,
off
I
the
think it
list,
lasts
what
for
more
like
can
3
you
to
get
5
off?
years. I think that might be the difference, whereas the free one, you have to do it over again. And the paid one might include all members of your family. It's little things like that,
Okay.
yeah.
I want to get off the junk phone calls.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that too. So the next one is, how many here have had an energy inspection on their house? Well, that's still really good. You know, I just have to mention that we own a house that was built in 2006. Now, would you think that that house would need an energy inspection? Well, it did. We found out that really these building code standards that people have said are so good are really not that good. And we found out that we now have, it's not really what they would call LEED certified, but we had an inspection. And we know both Green Savers and Neil Kelly, and they're both excellent. So if you want to do that with either, Green Savers is actually out in the lobby, so they could talk to you about that. But I really recommend it because you would be surprised where you have energy leaks in your home, even if it's a new home or a newer home like ours was. But if you heard in the next session, solar is getting so cheap now that the payoff, I know that Roger Worthington said 9 years, but you know, he did a lot of equipment too. But we calculated out that ours would be about, because we're installing solar with E2, and we determined that our payoff was going to be about 7 years. We did qualify for the federal tax credit and for the energy trust, and I believe there was another one.
There's a state tax credit.
State, yes, thank you, which I think is the biggest.
There's a point worth making. Tax credits only work if you pay taxes. For poor old
Yes.
farts like me who retired,
Yeah,
we
For the
actually.
state tax credit, there is a pass-through. If you have a rich aunt, you can pass it through.
I know you can, but you have to do it ahead of time.
It's
You
some
can't,
extra
you can't
paperwork.
find out, oh crap. I'm not getting it.
Is anybody working to take the tax credit that does this gentleman and myself no good, to convert that into a subsidized zero-interest loan that's billed on the meter?
well,
That would be a better way to do it, or have to have that as an option. I know that there are some things that bill themselves as being nonprofit loans, but they still charge 6%, and that 6% can be a killer.
well, that's something we have to look at, which I'll mention in the best practices session on day 2. But Oregon probably needs to have stronger net metering rules. And did they talk about that? I didn't go in the
They
next.
touched on there a little bit, yeah, on
Okay.
the net metering rules.
Are you in the solar industry? or-
I am, yeah. I work for
Could you
some-
tell us a little bit more about the net metering rules in Oregon?
Yeah, well, there's basically we have two basic different categories of power that we get our electricity. There's through the BPA, like Central Electric Cooperative, and Mid-State Cooperative, or some of you probably on, and those are the Bonneville Power Administration. Those are basically local electrical cooperatives that kind of go under the guideline of the Bonneville Power Administration. They tend to be cheaper cost of power, and it is, I don't know what, Rob, maybe 90% hydro-based off of the dams, and then some
I
other.
guess what I meant, the net metering, what they allow you to deduct, because they won't allow you to carry it over for only so long.
Right, well, if you're if you're part of the Intertrust of Oregon, so you're Pacific Power, which many of us are, then you can roll over your overproduction, say in the summer months, roll it over month to month, and basically at retail rate. So let's say in the summer, you don't use air conditioning a lot. Now, if I'm getting your question right and understand it right, but you can roll over your power and you always get a retail rate reimbursement from, say, Pacific Power.
But they'll only allow you to do that for so long. And I
Yeah,
don't,
it's
and I
for a
don't,
Runs on
year,
a
you don't wanna
12-month
produce
cycle.
more than
Yeah.
you use in a given year. And
Yeah.
so they audit April 1st to March 31st. And so what you wanna look at is, let's say if your house only uses 5,000 kilowatt hours, you really wanna limit your solar, which around here would be probably a 4 kilowatt system, at 5,000 kilowatt hours.
right, and you don't get paid for that, you just use it against,
It's a
whereas
credit.
there are other states, like Washington State, for example, that actually pays people. And I think they've cut back on that, but,
Yeah, that was kind of a limited format. And
Yeah.
Actually, the return here in Oregon's pretty good with that renewable energy tax credit.
but yeah, I mean, it's still not terrible.
Well,
So,
what happens if you generate more than you use?
Uh-huh.
What the power company does is, they don't just skim the profit, they actually, this is Pacific Power, they assign that to help low-income people.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
actually does value.
yeah, so it goes to blue sky, yeah, yeah. So, good thing to think about, and, as you heard in the next room, community solar is an option for those that can't put solar on their roof, and I've actually talked to people that even if they have a shady roof and they can't put solar on it, that they actually have a standing panel. So the one thing that we're going to do in our home is that we're going to, we plan on getting an electric vehicle. And so we haven't put our charging unit in yet, but we have planned for the solar. Our solar is going to be put on probably in the next 2-3 weeks. We have planned for an electric vehicle so that we will have enough power on our home to charge that electric vehicle. So that's something you want to think about when, and did Zach mention that
I don't think so.
in his, well, something to think about anyway. If you're calculating solar on your home, think about everything, including your electric vehicle. And for us, just because we use so little power, we do all those shut off your lights, shut off your, we only needed, I believe, 4 extra panels, given the amount of driving we do and the amount of our other electricity usage. But it could be anywhere from 3 to 10 panels, depending on how much driving you do. So the other thing is, how many here try to buy locally grown produce? All right. Sometimes I really am preaching to the choir, Anyway, we have such great farmers here, and the food has more nutritive value. It's, what is the reason why we want to buy locally anyway? Does anybody know?
Transportation.
It's healthier for you.
Self-sufficiency
Healthier?
and self-sufficiency and energy efficiency.
Self-sufficiency, yes, and fresher, yes.
Avoid the transportation.
Avoids, yes. Wouldn't it be great to keep those diesel trucks off the road? And we do that by buying locally, and that's what they do in the climate plans too, is they try to do everything they can locally. Because one thing we know, do you have any idea how much money goes back into the community for every dollar you spend locally? 40%. Wouldn't that be great to use that money that we are spending anyway and to help create jobs in our own community? And that's really one of the biggies as to why we want to buy locally. So the other thing that's good about community-supported agriculture is most of these farmers that we have, you notice they're organic, a lot of them, and they use the practices that keep carbon in the soil rather than having it be released into the atmosphere. Whereas, what do commercial growers do that's bad for the environment?
Use pesticides.
They use pesticides, and they're formed by what? They are created from what?
Oil.
Oil, petroleum, exactly. And what happens to those pesticides when they run off?
They pollute the water.
They pollute the water, exactly, in the city of
They hurt the
Prineville.
salmon.
Then they hurt the salmon. Does anyone here live in Prineville? Well, I was told, actually we thought of having a session on this, that the city of Prineville has so many nitrates from agricultural runoff right now, that they're gonna have to look at how they're treating their water. And we're noticing this now as time goes on, as the water treatment costs are becoming much greater. How am I doing on time?
Be a good time to transition.
Wrap up, okay. So I think I really had the wrong slide show here, but that's okay, we got through it anyway. Anyway, thank you very much.
Can I ask
I
a
think,
question?
what time am I supposed to be finished?
The session ends at 3, and I've got, 10 minutes is plenty for what I'm gonna do for them.
Can I ask a question? Can I
Yes.
ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to ask about how we can prevent Central Oregon Visitors Association from getting all the money that they really don't need. And getting the money to people who really need it, maybe to build more affordable housing or to invest more in farming. I think that's.
I don't have the answer to that, but I toss that out to the group. Does anyone have an answer for that? Did you all hear the question?
I think it's not easy. I think there's like the state legislature
Right, there
passed
is
something
law.
that the tax has to go to funding.
Right, well, I think maybe we need,
So it's
maybe
not
we need
easy.
to start pressuring the state,
Yes.
I mean, I know that it's almost impossible to do, but I'm hoping that we can raise our voices enough to say, everybody knows Bend is a great place. I read somewhere we have 20,000 people a week coming to visit. Let's end that. They're polluting,
Yeah.
we can't control their.
And you mentioned
driving or anything
the
else.
money from special interest, didn't you, Eric? Did I hear you say that?
That's part of it.
Yeah, I think they do get a lot of special interest money.
We're being loved to death. Can I do 2 quick things? In the session over there, I heard something that's fairly alarming, which was and I don't know who's behind it, but they're gonna be pushing legislature to try to expand natural gas into places where it's currently not in Oregon. That would be fracked natural gas, so that brings up the whole methane issue. And then the other little pet peeve I have on your stuff about waste, I've done some work on ocean issues, and we have these big garbage patches in the ocean.
Oh,
I don't remember the exact stat, but by volume, drinking straws are like one of the most prevalent in our ocean garbage patches, and it drives me crazy, and this is a hard one for me. I keep forgetting to ask, no straw. But I just put that out there
Yeah.
because we should have
Well,
a
some of-
policy
some
where
of
you
the
have to
straws-
ask for them.
And
Yeah,
all
that's a
the
good
tubs
point.
that you get have holes for straws.
Yeah.
It's-
Or even in the glass glasses
hard
at
to
a
buy.
restaurant, it's a straw.
And I've been told like Ola has potato straws, so, but still, it's still waste, so I have to get that habit too.
That's a hard one for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry if I cut into your time.
No, that's all
But-
right. Actually, we overlapped a lot of the content with the discussion we had, so.
Oh, good. So I bring to you, we should have probably opened the door in case someone else wants to come in here. Robert Del Mar and I'm going to let you finish your introduction so that I can open the door. Thank you very much.
So yeah, I'm Rob with Oregon Department of Energy, and I wanted to continue the discussion that actually started regarding financial incentives for conservation, efficiency, renewable energy options. Sounded like we had a primarily residential focused group in here. The main message that I wanted to deliver was that the state tax credit programs, including the one that provides a $6,000 tax credit for solar, provides incentives for a lot of other conservation, weatherization type measures. All of the residential energy tax credits are scheduled to sunset at the end of next year. So if you're thinking about doing some conservation measures on your home, now's the time.
You're 2017.
2017, and the way that it's going to work with the residential program is that you would have to essentially contract to have that measure installed by the end of next year, and then you'll have until tax time to actually have it installed. So there's a little carryover buffer that gets you into March. But it's the last year of the residential energy tax credit program that's been going for 30 plus years. And the legislature may extend it, they may modify it, they may shift it around, but the one sure thing we know is that it's in place for next year. So if you're on the fence with some measures, next year would be a good time to do it, or this year, yeah.
Do you know that for the freestanding panels, my home is too shady to get any of those, but I hadn't even thought about that. Can you get a freestanding panel?
Sure, yeah, there's,
Get some of these credits too?
yep, yeah, you can do basically mount them on a rack in a sunny part of the yard, and depending on how far from the house that is, you end up paying for a trench and some wire to get them back to your service panel. But plenty of folks do freestanding panels, and, yeah.
I don't have any place in my yard or my roof for a freestanding panel, but the homeowners association has some surplus property that I could probably get if the tax credit was still available to me.
And the challenge there is that the tax credit is for property that you have on your own house or in your yard, let's say, as far as a fixed mount goes. But there is a new, excuse me, I'm end of a cold, but there is a new program that's been started, which is known as the community solar program, where you could theoretically team up with a bunch of neighbors, get a solar system installed in a off-site location, and working through the utilities, you would get essentially a credit on your bill for the production from that facility.
Net meter, yeah.
It wouldn't be traditional net metering or what they would call virtual net metering. They're actually going to be crediting your bill at what they're calling the resource value of solar, and that has yet to be determined. So it'll either be less than or more than the retail rate, and that'll have a big, depending on whether it's less or more, will basically create the rest of the incentive stack necessary to make those systems work. But the Public Utility Commission is currently working on the rules for that program. And we're actually just about to our transition. I've got some cards if folks are interested. I'm here locally in Bend. Oregon Department of Energy is in Salem. So if folks are interested in more information, feel free to reach out to me.